This whole thing started in 2005. I was 14 and ended in 2011. I was 20. In the summer and fall of 2005, my grandparents had moved into a tiny mobile home park, kind of in between two small towns. At the end of the road that they lived on, a shopping center was still being built, and at the time, there was only a Target store. Keep this in mind, because it is truly where the story begins. Being as I stayed at my grandparents' home quite often, think 3 to 5 days a week, and it was the only store out there, we were there quite frequently. No specific employees ever stood out to us, nor do I ever remember seeing, let's call him Alvin, there. Within a few months, a Save Mart, if you're not in California, it's just a basic grocery store, was added to the shopping center, now making 2 stores out there. And naturally, since Save Mart has cheaper groceries than Target, we began to shop there instead. This is where Alvin made himself known, whether he intended to or not. I can't tell you how many times we would go down random aisles and this dude would just show up. At first, he would act like he was just restocking shelves or cleaning, but eventually he would just stand there and stare at me. And he would do this in every aisle we went to. Then as we would leave, he would refuse to let anyone else bag our groceries for us, and would still bag the groceries and follow us to our car, even if we refused the help. This went on for months, until just as quickly as he made himself known, he quickly disappeared, or at least we thought. As time went on, things were quiet, and I eventually started seeing Alvin again around Save Mart, but he no longer did that weird shit like before. And around 2009 to 2010, I got into more of the internet and social media scene, and became quite into a site called My Yearbook, and was actually quite popular on there, and would get multiple friend requests a day. So when I got a request from a guy named Alvin, given I never knew this guy's name, no alarm bells went off. I frequently would exchange phone numbers and sometimes meet people from My Yearbook, and eventually began texting with Alvin. For over a year, we texted, and nothing more, but we were able to have a good flow of conversation and talked about life. I found out he worked at a Save Mart, and I tried to figure out which one. There's a few in my hometown, so that maybe one day when I was out running around, I could stop off and say hi or something, but he kept refusing, so I let it go. Eventually, New Year's Eve 2010 rolled around, and I was having a party with my best friend, her brothers, and a few of our other friends, and invited Alvin. He tried to say he worked late and didn't know if he could make it, but I was determined to get him over to the party. I talked him into showing up, and when he did, I instantly regretted it. My best friend and her brothers, let's call them Leah, Randy, and RJ, knew all about this guy and how weird he'd been. And when he showed up, I realized who he was. I did my best just to enjoy the party without interacting with him much. My friend's brother, who I'd had kind of a thing with, stayed right with me, but so did Alvin, and the whole night, no matter how many times my friends tried to interact with him and get him away from me, he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't speak to them or even acknowledge them. He literally just stood there and stared at me the whole time, and besides saying hello when he came in, said not one other word to even me. It came down to midnight. We did the countdown where Randy and I made a big show about kissing and all that, thinking it would throw him off. It didn't. He stared even when that happened. And finally, Leah and RJ came up with a plan to pretend all of us were going to bed now, and then told him he needed to leave. Luckily he did, and then again, just like before, he seemed to disappear. Around November, I had gotten, and lost, my first job, which afforded me to buy a car. Grandma and I were still shopping at Save Mart, but Alvin wasn't bothering us really, except for again occasionally seeing him around the store. where he would speak to my grandma, but not me. This particular day, though, he hadn't followed us at all, and I thought us leaving would go over without any appearance from him. I was wrong. He came over, began bagging our stuff, even though we'd said no, and then began following us to the car again, talking to only my grandma about how I needed to apply at Target, because when they first opened, he worked there, and if I put him on my application as a reference, I'd get the job. And of course, I had seen through his manipulation tactic, but my grandma, unfortunately, not so much. She kept going on about how I should do it, so I explained to her everything that happened, and not only did it shut her up, she took my side. Long story short, I applied without his reference and got the job, but had turned it down for a better opportunity. He began following me around the store again, and I a few times would say hi, just to let him know I knew he was there, and eventually he did ask me to hang out under the guise of it being a group hangout with him and some of his coworkers. It was all a lie. When I showed up, which was my biggest mistake, but I was a bored 20-year-old, and my boyfriend at the time had encouraged me to go because he wanted me to make more friends. It was just him. I sat at a table at the donut shop for around 20 minutes before I made an excuse and left. He asked to hang out again about a month later, and since he'd stopped following me around the store and acted semi-normal the last time, I agreed. We met at Starbucks. Around 9:30 they closed, and I walked to my car thinking, cool, that's that, I can go home now. But nope, he invited me to his house. I said no, but he also said his mom had homemade cookies and stuff there and wanted to meet me, so I thought fine, I'll go get a cookie and leave. He told his parents and siblings that I was his girlfriend. The whole time I kept correcting them and telling them that no, I already had a boyfriend and Alvin was not him. They just kept ignoring it, so I panicked and hid in the bathroom on the phone with my then boyfriend, trying to figure out how to get out of there. My boyfriend said to say that there was an emergency and leave, then come straight to his house. I did just that, and all night, Alvin wouldn't stop texting me and tagging me in random Facebook posts about love and relationships. I blocked him on all the socials I had back then, and I turned my phone off and went to bed, thinking never again. He began not only following me around the store, but if I was out anywhere, he'd show up there. Like one day, I was getting snacks and an energy drink at a convenience store, and in he came. His excuse?
I saw your car outside and I wanted to come say hi to you.
And that wasn't the first or only time he did that. Finally, my boyfriend and my boyfriend's dad threatened him to make him leave me alone, to which he sent me a long text about how me not being with him was a mistake because he was apparently a children's pastor, rich, and owned his own house. Oh, he also later on in the text he sent admitted not only to having unprotected sex, which I'm not against, you do you, but having it with the underage girls in his youth group. WTF? No. Just absolutely no. He again disappeared at Save Mart, at least from me. When my grandma or grandpa would go in without me, he would relentlessly hound them about how he had a large bank account and how his parents bought a house for him and that they needed to make me break up with my boyfriend and be with him. When my grandpa exploded on him one day about leaving me alone, he then started in about,
well,
me.
Has a sister.
She was a minor at that time.
And I could date her.
At this point is where both my grandparents filed complaints against him to his supervisors, and where they learned they weren't the first. Multiple female employees had either complained about sexual harassment or left the job completely because of Alvin. Luckily, this led him to getting fired, and I haven't seen him since. Last I heard through the grapevine, he'd knocked up one of those teenage girls in his youth group and married her. So Alvin, I hope we never meet again. I'm going to start this story off by saying that at the time this happened, I was a 19-year-old sophomore in college. I was living on campus in their apartment-style dorms, and my college wasn't exactly in the nicest part of the city, so I'd usually drive a little bit farther to go grocery shopping so I could be in a little bit more of a safer area. The night this happened, I was going to cook dinner and realized I didn't have some of the spices I needed. Normally, I would have just said forget it and made something else, but the meat had already been thawed for a day or so, and I needed to cook it. I debated just going to the Walmart that was 2 minutes away from my campus, but it was getting late, and I didn't want to go there by myself in the dark. That Walmart is right next to a major highway, and being a girl by herself, I felt uncomfortable risking it, so instead, I went to the Walmart that was about 20 minutes away, a few towns over. I got to that other Walmart and bought my spices, along with a few other things, and checked out, no problem. By the time I was done, it was now completely dark out. I was back at the driver's side of my car and putting my few bags in the passenger seat when I noticed a woman. She was African American, maybe in her 50s, looking at the back of my car. At the time, I drove a really old car, and if you knew your cars, it would be surprising that it was still running. I've had a few people in the past, older men usually, look at or come up and ask me about my car. I figured that this is what the lady was doing, and I kind of ignored it until, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her come around my car and stop about 2 feet behind where I was standing. I was parked next to a parking lot median, so it's not like she was getting into a car next to me.
"Excuse me,"
she said. I turned around, saying, "Yes?" kind of preparing to answer, "What year or model is your car?"
"My church is giving out leftover boxes of food from our food drive to people in need. Could I give you one? We have them in our car over there."
This immediately set off an alarm in my head. I mean, she had just seen me put my groceries in my car. Why would I need something else if I just went shopping? Also, the churches and food pantries around my college were usually cleaned out after they had their shopping days for people who really relied on things like food drives. There was hardly, if ever, anything that was just left over. I'd watched enough Criminal Minds and read enough Facebook posts to know that this felt like a human trafficking lure. I stuttered over my words a bit at first, trying to figure out what to say, but finally got out, "Oh, no thank you, I'm good. I'd like to see it go to someone who could really use it." I felt like that was an okay response if she really was handing out boxes.
"Are you sure? They're just right over here in my car,"
she said, taking a step and making the gap between us a little smaller. I was panicking. As she stepped closer, I tried to nonchalantly put my hand in my bag and look for the small pocket knife my dad had given me. My mind was racing as I tried to find the knife, but also tried to keep my face looking calm and not suspicious. I repeated to her that I was good, and the box of food should go to someone who could really use it. She finally seemed to let up, saying,
"Okay, have a good night. God bless you,"
and all that. I told her to have a good night as well. Then, as soon as her back was turned, I got into my car and locked all the doors. As I pulled out of my parking spot, I noticed that the car she was walking to had 3 large men standing at the trunk of the car. They were barely illuminated by the parking lot lights, but I think it was an early 2000s white Nissan. As I tried to go down the parking lot aisle as fast as I could, I saw the men looking at the back of my car, just like the woman had. I then noticed where their eyes were shifted to. They weren't looking at my car, they were looking at my license plate. Just as I got to the end of the aisle, waiting to turn, I saw two of the men get in the front seats, and the other man and woman get in the back seat. Their car started, and they started to pull out too. I was having a full-blown panic attack now. Just a week before, my friend had posted something on Facebook about how two men followed her and her mom through a Walmart. Again, I had watched enough crime shows to know that this wasn't painting a pretty picture. I finally got my opportunity to turn, but that car was coming up behind me. I made the quick decision to take a really odd way back to campus. I made a ton of turns and went through a lot of small streets instead of taking one of the two main roads. I don't think I saw the car again after I pulled out of the parking lot, but I was definitely not risking it. By the time I got back to my college, I had calmed down a little. I started to wonder, maybe you're overthinking this. Believe there are actually good people in the world. And I decided that if they were really giving out boxes of food, then hopefully it does go to someone in need. That was until I was walking behind my car, heading towards my building. There was an SF faintly written in white sidewalk chalk on the brown paint of my car. I was shocked and terrified, knowing that I definitely did not put that there. I said out loud, "Oh my fucking God," as I practically dropped my bags on the ground and rushed to wipe the chalk off with the sleeve of my jacket. My car had been tagged. After a few seconds of wiping, the chalk was gone, so I locked my car, grabbed my bags, and raced into my building. I got into my dorm and saw the dinner I was supposed to make, but I had lost my appetite completely. I put everything away and went into my bedroom, still reeling over what had happened in the last 45 minutes. I sent the whole story as a Snapchat video to some of my friends, who were just as shocked as I was. My one friend Sarah says that she thinks SF stood for single female. It made sense, which made the whole experience that much scarier. I called my mom afterwards and told her everything that happened, and by the end of the call, she was sending me an Amazon package with pepper spray in it. I didn't go out after dark or by myself for about 2 weeks after that happened. I'd have a friend from campus or work go with me, or I just wouldn't go. The whole situation was terrifying, but I think the strangest part about all of this was that I was supposed to have been in the safer area. I drove all the way to that Walmart because I had a bad feeling about the one that was closest to me. I started going to the Walmart that was closer to me after that, and I've never had a negative experience at the closer one since I started going. It's hard to believe that all this stuff I've seen on TV and the internet could have almost happened to me. So, to the people in the Walmart parking lot in November 2020, let's not meet ever again. This story happened many years ago. I was 19 years old, and I lived with my parents at a home in a fairly bad neighborhood. At the time, I had a very large, loving dog that was half Great Dane and half English Mastiff, who was the sweetest little angel you could ever meet, but huge. We're talking over 5 feet on her hind legs and well over 100 pounds. It was late one night, and I decided that the middle of the night was when I wanted to go to a local 24-hour grocery store to get a few snacks. At the time, I didn't own a car, but I did have a license, and my father had a car. Since I was young, I figured I could take the car, drive the few miles to the store, pick up my snacks, and be back having the car in the driveway before anyone knows I'm gone. The only issue was I knew my dog would start barking and crying if I left her alone while I went to the store. So I decided that I would take her with me, leave her in the car, since it's the middle of the night, so it's not going to be hot, and all will be well. I get to the store, get out, and pick up a few snacks, pay the total, and head back to the car. It's the early 2000s, and my keys are on a lanyard around my neck. As I'm walking quickly towards my father's car, I noticed in my peripheral vision that there's a man who had just gotten up from a bench on the side of the building. I hear him say something, but I don't turn around, and I have no clue what it was. I start to quicken my pace, and I wonder if I'm being paranoid. By the time I open the car door, this man was in a full sprint towards me. No keyless entry system or alarm. I slam the car door shut, and before I can even lock the door, I see a hand slam on my window, full palm. In the next split second, my beautiful, amazing, huge dog lunges from the passenger seat across my driver's seat towards the window, with teeth and barking. I had never seen her act like that. Then I hear an,
"Oh shit,"
before the man disappeared off into the darkness. I got home safe that night, and nothing came out of it. The neighborhood this store is located in is notorious for panhandlers and theft, so I can't tell you for sure what the person wanted from me, if they would have hurt me, or if I was just overreacting. What I can tell you is that I'm very glad I had my baby with me that night.